Good morning. Okay. My name is Colby Morris, and
I'm Ava Spicer.
And the focus of our project was particle matter and air toxics on chalkboards. And okay, so the primary motivation for our project was the question: do classrooms with chalkboards have more dust particles in the air than those without chalkboards? And following this, our hypothesis was that given the nature of chalk particles and general intuition, we would say that they would have a greater number of air particles. Okay, so just before we start on our project, a little background on chalk. The main ingredient for chalk is calcium carbonate, which is a type of limestone. And then following this, they add chemicals to create the vivid colors, purple, blue, green, whatever. And then also, there are concerns about toxicity. A lot of the chalk that they make goes through tests to ensure that it's non-toxic. In addition, they have laws and regulations that determine whether this chalk will be safe or not. And the chalk has to be tested by toxicologists before it can be put onto a market. In addition, most school chalk is non-toxic. And then also, they've developed dustless chalk, which basically it's the same basic makeup, but it has heavier particles. So when you write, they go directly to the ground instead of remaining in the air and having the possibility of being inhaled. And also, the one thing is, while this makes it safer, the only truly way to get rid of any sort of particles with chalk is to replace it through whiteboards, which is basically the rule and not the exception now.
Alright, so a bit of background information on the non-toxics is that they have shown that outdoor air quality is a lot better than indoor air quality because of their, my apologies. The particles are more compressed in a tight enclosed space. Pollutants can include oxides and from pollutants such as the mills. Also, there are particulate matter such as dust and vapors from chemicals, which we also experienced in our chemistry classroom this year. The particles can have an effect on several different parts of the body, mainly the respiratory system. The two types of particles are the inhalable coarse particles, which are between 2.5 and 10 micrometers. They're a little heavier and don't get through the lungs as much. But the fine particles that are less than 2.5 micrometers or smaller are a bit more dangerous. These are the primary concerns of the air toxic studies we've been doing this past year. And this is a diagram that shows how the pollutants get into the bottom of the lungs and build up in them. Alright, our methods and materials. Our first material was obviously the dust tract that we had learned how to program and use. However, one of the more difficult to find resources that we needed was an actively used chalkboard. Many of the chalkboards in our school have been replaced over recent years. And we also required a control classroom without a chalkboard and preferably without a lot of students going in and out. Alright, our methods. So what we did was we placed the dust tract inside the several classrooms with chalkboards that were used throughout the day. And there were about 6 to 8 hours each. There was a bit of time fluctuation because our two class periods had to share the dust tract, so we had to sign up for times. And the dust tract had to be clean and zeroed between each time trial. The control variable was whether the chalkboard was used or not. We had absolutely no control of what the students were doing. One of our classrooms was an art classroom, so you can imagine how many different things could go on in the day.
Okay, so our control classroom was the band room, and basically what we did is we put it in a isolated area of the band room so that there wouldn't be a lot of student activity or any chalkboard use. And so as you can see, it's not even remotely close to reaching their toxic standard. And so this basically shows what their quality is capable of being. Should there not be any interference?
All right, so this next one is the art classroom, and it stayed below the air quality standard, and it started spiking right as the first students entered, and calmed down with the study hall. The study hall, no students were using any of the art materials.
Okay, and then the other one we used is a math classroom where there was a chalkboard being actively used. And as you can see, this was sort of the same case where there were minor fluctuations, mainly due to student activity. There is one spike, which we aren't completely sure, but according to the math teacher who was monitoring it, he said that it was most likely because a student had just walked too close to it or bumped it or whatever. But yeah, but as you can see, there's very little effect. So basically our conclusion is that the hypothesis we had was inconsistent with the data, and that the data shows that chalk does not affect students and does not create a viable health hazard, and this can direct policy so that basically no changes have to be made, or it's more of a convenience factor transitioning to whiteboards. Spikes in the data were more related to other factors. And this is our works cited, and thank you very much.
Any questions? Well, just because they're becoming outdated in our school, there might be a lot of rural small schools that use chalkboards now, so figured it would be a good idea. Any others?
So you don't know anything about the particle size of chalk. Supposedly it's larger if it's non-toxic.
Well, basically there are two different types of chalk, and the main one that they have two different, like I said, they have two different types. One is they use a more heavy dust, which basically allows the dust, or it's called a dustless chalk, which basically has heavier particles, which allow them to fall to the ground right after it's being used, when it's being used. And I guess personally, I wouldn't understand why you wouldn't use this type of chalk just to avoid any hazard. But then they have the basic chalk that does have 2.5 micrometer particles that could.
So what kind of chalk did they use in the experiment that you ran?
This was normal chalk.
Normal chalk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Corvallis High School. Okay. Ready? So we're going to turn you on and just hold it like this. And talk right into the microphone. So introduce yourself when you start talking. Okay. So here's how you forward your presentation. You sit there. Okay. You got 5 minutes. You can do it.
Hello everyone, I am Chance Stewart,
I'm Carly Prentice.
and we did ours based on like open fireplaces. So our title, open fireplaces, life or death, good or bad, warm or cold. Question. So our question was, how do the PM 2.5 levels change when heating your house with an open fireplace? So we hypothesized that PM 2.5 will soar above the EPA 24-hour standard when heating your home with an open fireplace, because obviously the fire is going to release particles into the air. So procedures before the test, we set the dust track location, removed as much of the variables as we could, such as like pets and just activity. And they were done at the same time of the day and ran into the night, and tested on 2 separate days so that like the air would clear out and cleanse, obviously. And they were 9-hour tests.
And during the tests, we limited household activities like cooking, and we burned wood throughout the entire second test.
So this is the graph. The red represents the second test where we used the fire, and then the green is the control test where we just limited people going in and out of the room, and it just kind of showed what it's like when the fire isn't lit. And then the blue line is the EPA 24-hour standard at 35. So as you can see, obviously when you burn a fire, the PM 2.5 levels are drastically increased. And each of the spikes represents when the wood was put on the fire, and it kind of like relighted and put more PM 2.5 into the air. So this is just kind of an interesting chart. It shows how PM 2.5 levels can be directly related to your life expectancy. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that as it shows the less micrograms per cubic meter that you breathe in, the higher your life expectancy is on average. And then this just kind of is to show what we're dealing with and give an idea of just how small PM 2.5 really is. So that on the left is a grain of beach sand and then a piece of hair. And the PM 2.5 is obviously much, much smaller. So this is to show just kind of averages. So the blue is the EPA standard at 35, and then it shows that the fire burning average was much higher than the control average for PM 2.5 levels.
Okay, so we concluded that the average PM 2.5 levels increased by about 86 micrograms per meter cubed while the fire was burning. That's a lot. And we said that the improvements we could make on our test was we could have tested from multiple rooms or multiple houses. Tested when the weather was the same, tried to control that better, I guess. Test different types of wood and different types of fireplaces.
So in conclusion, burning wood in an open fireplace causes the PM 2.5 levels to be well above the EPA 24-hour standard, which supports our hypothesis. Any questions?
How far away from the fireplace itself did you have your dust track?
Okay, so she asked how far away the dust track was. Can you go back to the picture and just backspace it?
Did that one get skipped?
So in this picture, behind the couch of the big one, there's a countertop. And so the room is roughly like 300 square feet. So we're probably looking at like a 15-foot difference from where the fireplace is to where the dust track was set.
So you'd be out even beyond the range where people would comfortably be seen.
Yes, it was far enough out of the fireplace so that it wasn't going to get like flooded with the smoke that's just right next to it. But yes, it was well out of the range of where you would sit down, and the levels were still very high. Thank you.
I have a question. Was that source of heat within that home? The
Yes,
fireplace?
that's the main source of heat. To like.
All right, sorry to interrupt you. Oh.
One thing might be, who lit the fire? Was
lit
it
the
somebody
fire?
who knew how to build fires? Or was the fire built in such a way to push a point?
Oh, no.
So, was it a random fire?
So she asked like how the fire was built. It was built in a way that just anyone would do it, you know, like the dome of the wood, and then you might put like newspaper under it to let it start easier. But no, I didn't like increase the fire or anything to try and get results. I just did it as if we were heating the house for the winter.
Okay, because we have friends who build fires in our fireplace, and it varies quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's just make it like 3.
Hello, my name is Carly Terrell. This is Morgan Keck and Morgan Plasmere, and we are juniors from Big Sky High School, and we tested the comparison of air quality between high schools and middle schools. We began with our research question, which was, does the air quality and presence of PM 2.5 differ between high schools and middle schools? Some background information. Our schools are high traffic areas with a concentrated population of people in the vicinity. High schools have more students and more opportunity for mobility, and middle schools are not challenged with the variable of student transportation.
Our hypothesis was the air quality will be poorest in the high schools because there are more students, and the middle schools tend to be cleaner because of the age of students. Okay. For 6 months, ranging from October to April, air quality machines were placed in central high-traffic areas in the designated schools. The machines collected data on an average school day, approximately 7 hours. The data was then compiled and compared.
Okay, so this is a graph that we did at Target Range, which is a middle school, and this machine was left overnight, so you can see that during the school day, the spikes are high, and then when there's no one at the school, it actually levels out and gets lower. And then these are graphs from Hellgate and Sentinel and Target Range and Lewis and Clark. And we found that with the high schools, there's a peak between lunch and passing periods, whereas in the middle schools, the peaks are towards the end of the day.
So here's just some compiled data. So the maxes and the minimums and the averages between Hellgate, Sentinel, Lewis and Clark, and Target Range. The zeros for the averages were just because of negative numbers, which were just calibration errors, so that was out of our control. And in conclusion, in middle schools, the amount of PM 2.5 is more prevalent at the end of the day when school is let out. And in high schools, the peak of PM 2.5 occurs during the lunch hour and decreases at the end of the day. Yeah.
Would you mind putting your graph up there that compared the different high schools? So if the high schools, now do all of the schools let out around 3 p.m.? Is that pretty typical?
Yeah.
So if you think traffic might be an issue, and I would imagine a lot of high school students are driving, why do you think we're seeing such a drop in particulate matter, sort of at the dismissal?
For the high schools, you mean? Well, for the high schools, there's more mobility between the students. Some students get out earlier than others, whereas with middle schools, they're all getting out at one time in a more concentrated population in one area. So that would be the reason for that.
Are there usually, is there busing in either the middle schools or the high school? There might be buses idling at 3 p.m.?
Yeah, both. Mm-hmm.
Could you go to the next slide, please? When you calculate these averages, how many measurements did you make to calculate those averages? Is that just the average between maximum and minimum, and you did that once, or did you do it several times?
Well, we had like 4 tests from each schools except for Hellgate because we had some problems with the administration leaving the air quality machine running. So we only had 1 from Hellgate, but all the other ones were compiled data from 4 different days.
So I saw on the conclusions, when each type of school has its peak, but I didn't see a conclusion as to whether you felt your hypothesis was correct, that high schools would have poorer air quality than middle schools. So how would you assess that?
Okay, our hypothesis was disproven. We originally thought that the middle schools would be cleaner just because of the age of students, are more prone to sickness, allergies, I don't know. So, however, the middle schools ended up being the dirtiest, or I guess for lack of a better word. And then the high schools were more dirty just because of the amount of students. So. Thank you.
This is Hellgate High School. Yeah. It's okay. All right. So.
Just forward the presentation right there.
Okay.
Introduce yourself first.
Yeah.
You guys just look fantastic.
Hello, I'm Connor Panion.
And I'm Parker Scottson.
As you can see, there's only 2 of us. There's 4 names on the list there. They are at senior service day.
All right, and the title of our presentation is Vacuum Cleaners.
Yeah, so a lot of groups have talked about the negative side effects of particulate matter. There are serious problems for prolonged exposure, such as respiratory and cardiovascular health, and then as well as nervous system health.
All right, so our hypothesis, which vacuum will better reduce the amount of particulate matter in the air, bagged or bagless vacuum cleaners? Our hypothesis was that bagged vacuum cleaners would hold in more particulate matter due to the fact that the bag would act as a filter and that bagless would let more particulate matter rain free.
Okay, so we had 2 different vacuum cleaners. We had the Dyson DC-24 all floors vacuum bagless, Mild Blue Moon canister vacuum, which is a bagged vacuum. We had 2 rooms of equal size and a dust track.
All right, for our experiment, we had 5-hour trials with 1 control and 2 experimental. Each experimental test was given 2 hours before and after the use of the vacuum with an interval of 30 minutes to do the actual vacuuming. And our first graph here is with the bagged vacuum. The first spike you see is not related to the vacuuming, it's actually from cooking, as well as that second large spike. As you can see from the first spike at the start of the vacuuming, levels were raised a bit above the recommended levels, and shortly after they were reduced to levels that were safe. And our next graph is the test run by the bagless vacuum with 2 hours before, and then at the start of the vacuuming interval, we see a large spike. However, the scales on these graphs are not the same. You notice the maximum here is 0.017, and on the previous graph, that yellow line represents the actual maximum peak of the bagless vacuum.
In summation, we found out there's no strong correlation. So, that means that, there isn't, a direct or obvious correlation between the amount of particulate matter and the air type, the air quality. So the amount of particulate matter caused by the type of vacuum used. The vacuum cleaners did seem to increase the particulate matter at the beginning, and that could be because of the start or like the stirring up of dust particles as the vacuum is turned on. And then they do recede after vacuuming is done, and I don't know if that's the dust settling after the vacuuming or the vacuuming itself. That's why there's a really strong correlation between them.
Also, I just need to briefly mention some variables we wanted to note. We tried our best to keep the uncontrolled variables to a minimum. Both rooms used, while they were at different houses, they were at nearly identical square footage we even kept the number of pets the same, same amount of cats and everything. We also kept the window open before vacuuming, just to kind of get some airflow, and we shut that shortly before vacuuming, and we kept the room sealed during the testing period.
Feel free to open it up to any questions you guys may have.
Could I see your data slide, please, your graph?
First
That one. So why don't you see that as a significant difference?
Excuse me?
Well, like he said earlier, it was in different rooms. We tried to keep them pretty much the same, but it seemed like Holden's room is this case. Just had higher levels overall, and might have been a few things going on that we didn't label, but it seemed the first one was the cooking, and then the stirring up of particles before vacuuming.
One of the key differences between the two rooms, my room has an air filter in it. However, prior to the testing period, well before the actual testing, it was turned off, but there was no controlling the amount that it ran before the testing period. I just had it on before starting the tests. But it wasn't even on like 24 hours prior to testing. And that's also another thing we tried to eliminate by opening both windows in both testing environments.
When you were talking about trying to do your best to control variables, the open window, things like that, keeping them the same, what about the floor covering, the actual surface that you were vacuuming, were those similar?
Yes, those were also controlled, both were carpet, obviously not bare floored, but they were the same, about the same height too, as opposed to like this type of carpet or maybe more.
And about age, did you look at age of the floor covering?
No, we did not look at the age of the carpeting.
Since you used, as you noted, two different graphs for each kind of vacuum, as I remember the numbers for the bagless, its peak is like a third of what the bag vacuum is, and yet you say there's no real correlation or there's no difference between bag.
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the averages before, the averages of the bag vacuums start much higher anyway. I mean, and then, but also there's all those points that, you know, kind of scattered throughout. That must have been because of the dust that was stirred up before vacuuming. Maybe Holden had a different method of turning on the vacuum, or I don't even know.
So it has to do with the ambient status before the vacuum is turned on?
I believe so.
So I just had a question. So when did you start vacuuming? Was it?
The first test was...
Is that right there? Is that when you started?
Yeah, that's the starting period of the vacuuming, right a little bit before 9 p.m. And then the second test was started around 15 minutes after 2 p.m. So there is a slight time interval difference.
You show where you started vacuuming. Are you seeing the fall off, you turn off the vacuum, or are you just seeing it gradually decrease even though the vacuum is still on?
Yes, here, the test I did here, yeah. The peak right here is, you know, the obviously maximum one too. But I stopped vacuuming at this period when I noticed that it wasn't really going any more higher. That's where it peaked. And then here, this significant decrease is when I opened my door, and that's why it just kind of allowed more movement.
And on the other chart, how does that play out?
Well, right here, here's the start of the vacuuming, and then this peak is just before he stops around here, and then it slowly kind of goes down. But again, we use similar vacuuming methods, doing the whole floor and then hitting all the corners and everything.
So is it better to dust first or to vacuum first?
I don't see any harm in dusting around a little bit before I would probably stop. I mean, when I was vacuuming my room, you could see everything. It was pretty dusty.
All right, thank you.
roundabouts compared to traditional traffic light intersections and their implications in air quality. I'm Brandon Shannon from Sentinel High School. So vehicular pollution is a serious and growing problem, particularly particulate matter PM2.5, which I think has been addressed so far in this symposium. It causes a number of health issues: carbon monoxide, a toxic known toxin, and carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas. So city planners design congested traffic areas to optimize efficiency and minimize pollution. So often this leads traffic engineers to use roundabouts because they're believed to be better for air quality and traffic flow. And especially in the city of Missoula, which is facing both air quality issues and traffic congestion issues, they've been incorporating roundabouts in their traffic design. So the problem is, are roundabouts beneficial to vehicular pollution when compared to traditional traffic lights? And this has a specific impact here in the city of Missoula because we do face air quality issues because of the topography and because we have in the past been very close to meeting the EPA standards for air quality. And again, I think this has been addressed. The topography, just we don't have any horizontal transport of pollutants because of the urban valley center we live in. And if there's weather conditions such as inversions that don't allow for the vertical transport of those pollutants, we get those pollutants trapped in inhaled air. And so that just magnifies the problem here in Missoula. So as far as the location, the two areas that I tested were a roundabout, the one just right over here on Higgins Hill and Beckwith, and then compared it to the traditional traffic light just down the road of Higgins and South. And both of these are on the same main road, and they experience very similar traffic flow when you look at the Department of Transportation's numbers. Over a day, they experience a difference of like 20 cars, which is almost nothing when you consider how many cars go through those intersections. So as far as the procedure, I used a dust track and a Q track obtained from the University of Montana here just to collect data at the two locations. As far as statistics go, first of all, I just used a visual comparison, graphed the data over time. Second of all, I used the difference of the means just to show, what the practical significance is, what the difference between the two locations was. And then finally, just to make sure that this was statistically significant, I used a two-sample t-test. So obviously I had to keep in mind some other variables, so I ran several trials, and two had very similar meteorological conditions that I feel confident in comparing because they were so similar. Both days had similar middle-of-the-week traffic, and both had similar meteorological conditions. As you can see from this graph, the temperature and the pressure those days was almost identical, and the wind was negligible on both days. So my hypothesis is because they're on the same main roads, they're going to experience, the two intersections are going to experience similar air quality. And the results actually are pretty surprising. To generalize, they indicate that the traditional traffic light is better for air quality than the roundabout. Specifically, PM2.5, you can see the EPA's standards is over a year, the mean must never exceed 0.15 milligrams per meter cubed, and there was a difference between the two locations, a very statistically significant difference of about 0.01 milligrams per meter cubed, and so this one traffic light could play a role in meeting, this one difference in intersections could play a role in meeting these standards. Same thing for carbon monoxide. In an 8-hour period, the mean shouldn't exceed 9 parts per million, and the difference between these two traffic lights, again, very statistically different, was about 1/3 of a part per million. So this one intersection could play a role in meeting that. And then as far as carbon dioxide goes, there was almost no difference between the two intersections. So I did run 3 other trials that all support these. However, the meteorological conditions were different, so different that I'm not confident to draw conclusions from these. I was hoping to get some more data in the past week, this spring, but every time I had a free morning, it was raining, which is not surprising here in Missoula. So in conclusion, according to this research, traditional traffic lights are actually better for air quality than roundabouts. And one possible explanation for this, because this is a surprising result, is when you're moving through a roundabout, you're actually traveling at slower speeds, less efficient speeds, when your vehicle builds up and pollutes more. Whereas if you're running through a traffic light, you're either stopped when your vehicle is idling more efficiently, less pollution, or you're traveling at higher speeds. And according to this research, it seems to take care of the problem of stopping and starting. So this is important for city planning because they need to know the implications on air quality of their design, although roundabouts may still have an advantage as far as traffic flow. It just depends on who you talk to. Some Missoulians like them, some don't. And I was hoping to have some more testing, get some more data, and then let the Missoula County Health Department and the Montana Department of Transportation know about these results because I think it's important they should know the implications of their traffic design. that, I'll answer any questions.
So Brandon, would you go back to your hypothesis, please?
Sure.
Why were you thinking just because of the traffic flow that then you thought they'd be similar?
Yeah, I thought that because they have the same traffic flow, they'd be similar. Also, this hypothesis allowed it to make the statistics on this project a little bit easier. To be honest with you, that's probably why I picked this hypothesis.
And so then after doing your testing, how many tests did you do altogether?
I ran 6 trials, but I only compared the 2 because of the meteorological conditions. And then a trial was 6 hours of taking air quality samples every minute.
And so then what would you say about your hypothesis then? Did your tests support that?
My hypothesis is wrong. According to my test, the traditional traffic light is better for air quality than the roundabout.
Where did you place your instruments?
I put them in my truck and parked them on the side of the road, and I was really careful to be consistent about the placement of the vehicle and, in relation to the traffic and the actual intersection. So I actually placed it on the same road on both sides of Higgins, the same distance from the intersection.
Is that the roundabout right there?
Yeah, that's the roundabout. So if you can, I can actually show you where about the.
Right.
Okay. I parked my truck in this parking lane that starts right about there, and then I actually measured this distance, kind of eyeballed it, and made sure to park about the same distance on this same road at the traffic light.
So these tests were conducted at different times, though?
They were, but again, I showed you the controlled data, such as the the traffic and the meteorological conditions.
So how many cars went through the inspections?
I didn't collect traffic data for those days, but according to the Montana Department of Transportation, they measured the amount of traffic that goes through these intersections in early 2010, and it was very similar.
So one person can be driving right here. Okay. So you guys are not nervous, right? Cool. Okay. So you got 5 minutes. Have some fun with it. And there's some cold hard cash.
Hi, my name is Shelby Layton, and our question was, what does asbestos do to your health? What is asbestos? Asbestos is a group of naturally occurring minerals used in products such as building materials, and vehicle brakes. It is highly resistant to heat and corrosion. Amosite, termalite, asbestos, anthophyllite, asbestos, chrysotile, crocidolite, actonolite, asbestos. All of these fall under the category of asbestos when chemically treated or altered. And these are asbestos fibers. When does asbestos exposure become dangerous? Everyone is exposed to asbestos during their life. Small amounts of asbestos are found in air, water, and soil, but not in dangerous concentrations. Asbestos becomes dangerous when you are exposed on a regular basis in high concentrations, normally at a workplace or at older schools. Often workers are required to handle products containing asbestos or asbestos in a processed form. Where might asbestos be? Before asbestos was known to be dangerous, it was greatly envied for its nearly indestructible nature. It was used in over 3,000 building products from 1900 to 1980s. Most of these products were banned, some replaced, and some still legally produced to this day. Asbestos is safe till it is damaged, decayed, crumbled, then it will release asbestos fibers into the air where inhalation may occur. A lot of older structures still hold a few asbestos-containing materials.
This is the school that we went to school, or our class went to school in for a year and a half. It was demolished because it was condemned for asbestos.
What are the dangers of asbestos? When inhaled, asbestos fibers can cause serious disease of the lungs and organs that may not surface for many years after exposure. Asbestos may cause buildup of scar-like tissue in the lungs that cause loss of proper lung function that evolves to cause disability or death. Asbestosis. Asbestosis is a progressive, long-term, benign disease of the lungs. It is caused by breathing in asbestos fibers that irritate lung tissues and cause the tissues to scar. The scarring inhibits oxygen from getting into the blood. Symptoms of asbestosis include shortness of breath and a dry sound in the lungs while inhaling. There is no treatment for asbestosis. Lung cancer. Lung cancer causes the largest number of deaths related to asbestos. People who work in the mining, processing, and manufacturing of asbestos, and those who are exposed to asbestos and its products are more likely to be diagnosed with lung cancer than the general public. The most common symptoms of lung cancer are coughing and a change in breathing. The other symptoms include hoarseness, chest pain, shortness of breath, and anemia. Mesothelioma is a rare form of cancer that is found in the thin membrane of the lung, chest, abdomen, and heart, and is almost always linked to exposure to asbestos. This form of cancer may not show up until many years after asbestos exposure. This is why great efforts are being made to prevent exposure in schools.
This is our school before it was demolished, or before demolition started. Like I said, we were all pretty much exposed to asbestos for a while, and I guess could be at a risk of mesothelioma.
When does asbestos exposure occur? You may be exposed to asbestos in your workplace, home, and surrounding community. Anytime products containing asbestos are disturbed, tiny particles too small to be seen with the naked eye are released into the air and will cause inflammation and scarring when in contact with a mucous membrane such as your lungs, eyes, and airways. These small particles can stay in clothes, shoes, hair, and other body parts. This is a story that I thought was very appropriate to tell because it's about secondhand exposure, and it was taken from kznlaw.com. UK coroner, housewife's death caused by indirect asbestos exposure. A coroner's inquest in the UK recently heard that a housewife's mesothelioma death was caused by her exposure to asbestos on her husband's work clothes. Late last year, Pamela Whitmore was diagnosed with mesothelioma, a rare cancer caused by asbestos exposure, and died just 5 days later, according to the Derby Evening Telegraph. Deputy Coroner for Derby, Louise Pinder, recorded Whitmore's death as a result of industrial disease caused by coming into contact with asbestos on her husband's clothes. There is more handling of clothes than there would have been in the modern day process, the coroner said. Ms. Whitmore was exposed indirectly. She was exposed in some way that was connected to employment, albeit her husband's employment. At the inquest, pathologist Andrew Hitchcock said that the connection between Whitmore's asbestos exposure and her mesothelioma was very strong. Whitmore's husband, Ronald, drove a truck and frequently carried bricks, pipes, and other asbestos-containing items, according to the couple's daughter, Jacqueline Higgins.
Got one question. Go ahead.
Is there any way to test asbestos levels in the air?
Yeah, people came to test our school, which is why it was condemned. I'm not exactly sure what the meters are called, but they were carrying handheld asbestos meters.
So you can collect it on a filter and then look at it under a high-powered microscope.
So you have 5 minutes once you get started.
Is it on? Hi, I'm Kim Maurer, and we are from Big Sky High School. This is Jeff Dark, Andy Mackey, and Dylan Schweitzer. And we did our air quality testing on the effect of furnace filters in homes.
Okay, so the question was, in our presentation was, we looked at the impact furnace filters have on a home's air quality, specifically during winter months when the furnace is working frequently.
We thought that replacing the furnace filter would decrease or would increase the overall air quality in the home for a little while, and then as the filter decreased, the air quality would decrease with it. There are multiple kinds of filters and environmental factors in the houses which couldn't change the experiment. We need to use houses with the same types of filters and furnaces to collect accurate data.
Methods: test air quality in both houses before changing the furnace filter, replace the filter, and collect more data in both the houses and control as many variables as possible.
Can't hold. Okay, these are some pictures of the furnace that was used and the types of filters. All right, so our results, we took a preliminary reading before we changed the furnace filter and found that the average particulate level was 0.004 milligrams per cubic meter, and the maximum spike was 0.037, and the spike you see in the graph is when the furnace turned on at night. And then we looked at the averages during the 1 month post preliminary and 2 months post changing the filter. And we saw that the average for the first month was at 0 because the furnace was new and it brought the particulate level down a lot. And then the average went up by 325% from the preliminary data during after 2 months. And then we looked at the maximums, and we found that the maximum in the 1 month reading was still very low and was at 0.002. And the 2 month data had a maximum that was very high and actually over the EPA standard, and was a 386% increase from the preliminary data.
In conclusion, the average lifespan of a furnace filter is supposedly 3 months, but our data suggests filters should be changed at least every 2 months under heavy winter conditions in order to maintain ideal particulate levels in a home.
Are there any questions? Yeah.
So you did 2 different homes?
Yes, we tested 2 different homes in the same neighborhood with the same types of filters because they were built around the same time, because we didn't want to test different types of filters.
So did you see the same types of dramatic?
Yeah, we mostly they were at the same rates. There was differences. We tried to keep all the variables as controlled as possible, but they basically followed the same trends. Anyone else? Oh, yep.
Do you know if your filters filtered the particle size that you were monitoring for?
We didn't look. We had to kind of do some research on what types of filters, because I use my house as one of them, and we've just been using the same filter forever. And we didn't really look at what types of particles they were filtering. We just used the same furnace filter that we've been using for the whole span.
Okay, ready? What is the, okay. So you just forward that with the arrow. Okay. So when we go live, we just click it to the side, and then you just talk in the microphone like this, and it's okay. Alright. Okay. Maybe 1 full minute.
Alright. Take it away. Hi, my name is Ben Uhlenbrook, and this is Daniel Harvela. And We are doing the air quality and shop classes, and our teacher was Ms. Hanthorpe.
So our question, it was primarily motivated by the fact that in our Chem 2 classroom, which is about a story above the shop classes, when the welding class is running the plasma cutter, which is this machine that basically vaporizes metal to cut out different shapes, you can actually just smell it, and it's like a really kind of, I don't know, it's just really noticeable, and that's a whole story above the actual classroom. So we wanted to see if there was a significant or harmful difference in the air quality if you were actually in the classroom. And so
we hypothesized that due to the cutting of wood and metal, that there would be a difference in the air quality in the shop classes, but we didn't know if it would be significant to the point that it would be harmful.
And for our procedure, we used the dust track to test over about 4 to 6 hour period in a control room, which was an art classroom, the welding shop, and the wood shop.
Right, and so the controlled variables that we had were the time and the duration of the trial, and then the location was the main variable that we controlled. And then the variables we were unable to control was the class size, because that would affect some air quality, and then the curriculum or class activities of that day, we were unable to control that.
All right, so this is our control, the art classroom. And as you can see, it's well below the air quality standard of 35 and presents basically no harm.
Okay, yep, this is the metals room, and the huge spikes are during when the plasma cam or the plasma cutter is running. The biggest spike was actually 1760 micrograms per meter squared, so that's quite significant. But then all the other times where it's pretty low, it was actually pretty insignificant to air quality, because it was like under 10 generally. But then there are a few spikes.
And then this is the woods shop classroom, which actually stays above the air quality standard for about the entire day. This drop comes during lunch when there's nobody in the classroom really, and these spikes are at the beginning of each period as people go in and start working.
All right, so since the air quality standard is 35 over a 24-hour average, well, since the wood shop averaged 163 over 4 hours, that's pretty significant. It's not necessarily harmful, but it's not really good for you. And then the metals room also averaged 87 over 6 hours, but that was mostly because of the spikes. It was generally pretty low, but that's still over the air quality standard, the averages.
Okay. And possible solutions for this problem would be to get a ventilation system over the plasma cutter, because at the moment there is no ventilation system over that. They have hoods over all the other machines in the workplace, but the one hood that they have for the plasma cutter is underneath and is really inefficient and doesn't work. And then the woods room actually doesn't have any air filters, and so that could possibly affect air quality.
Okay, so we thought to get more accurate data, we could test over 24 hours to get an actual 24-hour average, and then it would also be interesting to see the effect of air filters in the two rooms. But yeah, data was pretty conclusive.
All right. And in conclusion, we're going to say that the air quality is pretty bad in both classrooms, but in general, it's
only for 15 to 20 minute spikes, which isn't like constant exposure and wouldn't be harmful. So most students wouldn't feel any issues because they're only in there for a period, but teachers who are there all day may feel problems. All right, any questions?
I'm sure there's a lot of larger particulates that are in the air too, and this is my not being expert with the dust track, but was it at all difficult to separate what it was reading with the very small particles versus larger dust particles in the air?
The dust track only measures particles under 2.5, so any over that weren't measured at all, and I'm sure there was probably quite a bit because when the plasma cutter is running, you can see smoke and actual larger particles, so that probably means that the air quality was actually a lot worse than what we found.
Is testing over 24 hours going to do anything for you?
Well, the 24 hours was just to get, since the 35 milligrams is a 24-hour average, and ours are only 4-hour averages. So in hindsight, I guess it wouldn't really affect our results because kids are only there for about an hour or so. So yeah, that would, so no.
In terms of health effects, that's a really important issue. Is being exposed to extremely high levels, like 1,800 compared to 35 micrograms per ml, is that going to have a significant effect if you're exposed to that for 20 minutes compared to low chronic levels? So is acute or chronic going to be more deleterious to health?
I would say chronic would probably be more, since when you're only there for 20 minutes, kids usually don't feel any of effects from the operation of that machine, but when talking to teachers and after they've been in the class the whole day running it, they say they sometimes will be coughing and have black stuff come out and stuff like that. And that, so as far as actual illnesses or anything caused by that, I haven't heard of any or any problems, but it's probably something that needs to be addressed.
So you haven't lost any teachers to lung? Now, is there, when you talk about this EPA level, your children and you children are being exposed to dangerous air quality.
Yeah.
Tell me how the EPA cares about you, if you can. I mean, what does that action level actually mean if you're still being exposed to this?
Well, I'd say the EPA level is put out there and they're telling people about this, but as a case-to-case basis, I think schools or organizations are going to have to be counted upon to do their own work to make sure it's safe. And I don't know if the EPA has any sort of crackdown team for stuff like this. So I'm guessing it's just projects like this and informing people that would help the situation.
Well, I have one last comment. I think it's really cool as a chemist that you notice bad smells coming from another classroom rather than the chemistry.
Yeah.
People always blame the chemists for all the bad smells. But it's those wood shops.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to turn it on, and then you just start talking to the microphone. Okay? And then just to forward it, just hit the arrow.
Okay.
And you
Where's
guys
the
are last
little
president.
pointer? Hello, everybody. I am Emily Tinsman. And I'm Taylor Wilson. So our question was, how unhealthy is it to be in an environment with a running tractor? And our hypothesis was, if the environment is closed while a tractor is running, the pollution and toxins in the air will make your chances of being sick or dying very high. So a little bit of background information. Diesel exhaust is believed to play a major role in the outdoor pollution. Studies have shown that those who are constantly exposed to diesel emissions have a 50% higher chance of acquiring health issues. So for our procedure, we chose our location where the dust track would be set up and also designated the tractor that we would use. During the testing, we ran the dust track while the tractor was continuously idling for 30 minutes. Every 5 minutes, the door was opened 1 foot to see if the air quality would increase. Throughout the duration of the test, the measured area of the testing shop was taken. We recorded and analyzed, gathered data, and completed all of our graphs.
So this table, it shows that in the first 5 minutes, the door was shut completely, and then after the next 5 minutes, there was approximately 9 square feet of open surface compared to all of the surface area of the shop, and so it was about 7.5% that was open, and then in the next 5 minutes, we moved the door open another foot, which created approximately 17.5 square feet of open surface, which was the equivalent of 14.2% of open surface area. In the next 5 minutes, the door was open approximately 26 square feet, and it was the equivalent of 22.4% of all open surface area. And then the next 5 minutes was about 35 square feet, and almost 30% of all the surface area was open. And then in the last 5 minutes, there was approximately 43 square feet open, and it was about 37.3%. And then this graph shows that this was our testing period, and this was our start, and this yellow line at the bottom is the 35 EPA standard, and so as you can see, we got way up there, and so it's not very healthy at all. And then after our 30-minute period, I opened the door completely and shut the tractor off, and it took about 10 minutes for it to get down closer to the standard level.
So according to our results, the numbers we have acquired from our testing are above the set EPA 24-hour standard. It is not healthy at all for you to be in a closed environment with a running tractor.
So some improvements and changes were, we used a diesel tractor, and we thought that maybe we could compare the information against a gasoline tractor, and it could be taken over a longer period of time, and you could start the dust track with the building full of exhaust instead of starting with it empty. Are there any questions? Her question was where we had the tractor and where we were testing the air. Our tractor was in the shop with the dust track in it, and the dust track was only a couple feet away from the tractor while it was running. Yes?
Do you think the really high levels could have been contributed to being in a closed environment then?
Yes.
Probably.
So were you in the shop with the tractor running?
No, I was standing outside, and I just had a timer so that every 5 minutes I knew to open the door. Yeah?
I guess I missed the point about opening the door every 5 minutes or so, and you gave the percentages of how much the door was open and where that made a difference as far as the tractor emissions.
Well,
It really didn't make much of a difference, but that was just,
Please.
so at the beginning of our test, it was already pretty close to the standard. And so when we were opening the door, it really wasn't doing much of a difference, obviously. And I was just doing the surface area so that if you were to do it in a different size shop, you could actually use that information. But since how it really didn't make a difference, there was no. Yes?
So is this like to see the effect it would have on somebody that's riding the tractor? Because I feel like anytime you put something that's running in a closed spot, it's going to make the air quality bad, but I don't see why somebody would be in an enclosed area if something was running like that.
Well, when you're working on a tractor, like if there's something wrong with it, sometimes you have to start it up while it's in the tractor or in the shop to make sure that it's actually running right before you move it. And that happens a lot at my house. And so I was curious what it did. Are there any more questions?
Well, that's it for the presentations. Why don't we give ourselves a round of applause? You guys kept setting the bar higher every single year, so that was pretty awesome. And I think our judges probably agree that the presentations were very well done this year. And I'm sure the posters were done well, just as well. So we have a couple of things that we need to do first. So we need to thank our sponsors, and we have one of our main sponsors here in the room with us. So Montana Department of Environmental Quality. So Bonnie Rouse, who's way back there in the corner. Montana DEQ has funded our symposium for the last 5 years or so. So every single year, they're great partners, and they make this happen for us. And then there's some other folks that you may not see or be aware of, but so Rich Bridges, Vern Grun, and Andre Holin are our bosses, and it's the obligatory thanking them to stay out of trouble. And then in the past, the 3M Corporation has provided all the filtration units that Hellgate used this year. And we've had a lot more of those presentations in the past using the filtration units. Toyota USA Foundation and the National Institute of Health. So with that said, now we can have some fun. We always introduce the judges and recognize our judges so they can get out of here if they want to, or they can stick around for lunch and mingle with everybody. But we're going to introduce the judges one at a time, and then if you could give them a round of applause. But before we do that, I'd like to just say a couple things about lunch. So we have lunch provided by Subway outside. So we have ham, turkey, roast beef, and veggies. So they're in the little boxes. So because we're all conscious environmentalists now, so we're going to recycle the boxes. So when you're done with your boxes, just throw them in a corner. We'll tell you which corner to throw them in. Also, we have canned aluminum cans, so soda pops. So when you're done, don't throw them in the trash. Throw them in the recycling container. Okay. That was a special request announcement from the folks outside. So now we can introduce our celebrity judges and thank them. So first up, let's see, how about the Sturleys? So Andrea Sturley. So what you'll have to do is come down here in front of the firing squad and we get a free mug. So Don Sturley, come on down. So Ian Marquand. Aaron Yost. Ben Schmidt.
and Nancy Mara. So we're going to get a group photo. So everybody look at Muhammad. Okay, thanks, judges. Overhearing some of the discussions, and the quality of the presentations have been excellent, and the posters were excellent. So again, I think you should congratulate yourselves for a wonderful job today. So before we give out the awards, we're just going to call up some people and thank them, because there's a lot of people that put in some work to make this thing go pretty smoothly today. There is a poster judging panel, and you may not have seen them out there since we've been in here the whole time, but I like to call them down one at a time and recognize them. So Carolyn Hester, Marcy McNamara, Luke Montrose, okay. This gives me an opportunity to do what I do every single year. Luke. All right.
Perfect timing.
It's funny when there's nobody else in here. But, so Matt Ferguson. And Mary Buford. So if you have complaints about who won the posters, this is the people that you want.
Thanks, Tony.
So let's go ahead and recognize the point students. So the point students are the people within each of the classrooms that handle a lot of the work for the rest of you guys. So in years past, they've done a lot of work and make things go pretty smoothly within the classroom. So for Lapway, Lewis Wheeler. Come on down. For Big Sky, Chanel Packinen. Okay. Not here. So for Butte Central, Danny Thatcher. And 20 people from Butte Central. Gwen is not here either.
Well, I'm not Chanel. I'm just
All right. So now comes the fun part where we get to recognize the teachers. Because without the teachers, none of this would be possible. So how about first from Butte Central, Misty Cunningham. From Lapway, Paul Smith. From Corvallis, Brock Hamill. From Hellgate, Melissa Hinthorn. Big Sky High School, Dave Jones. Again? So, and Brett Taylor from Sentinel is not here. So, Brandon, do you want to accept for Mr. Taylor? Okay. So let's thank the teachers one more time. So then we had somebody that had to leave earlier, and we like to recognize Heidi Miley again. So Heidi, come on down. Thanks for giving the introduction this morning. And we'll hit you up for being a judge next year. So for posters, we've gone to a different format this year. So we have first, second, and third places, but we also have 3 honorable mentions. So I'll mention the honorable mentions first. So first off, we have Dusting Off the Weights from Hellgate High School. Raina, Zach, and Alex. So we have Measuring the Particulate Matter Around Dogs and Donkeys from Palmer High School. Betsy Downs, you're obviously not here today. I don't know where donkeys came from, but I don't know. So the third honorable mention is Medical Facility versus Woodstove Home, Corvallis High School. Annie, Shanley, Shelley, Whitney, and Avi. You can come down. We got stuff for you. Okay, let's do third place. Let's see, Big Sky High School, how various heating systems affect air quality in our homes. So second place is actually Palmer High School. All air fresheners created equal. All air fresheners created equal. Tyler Uttenberg from Palmer High School. Second place. So first place is actually another Alaska school, Hoona High School. Joe Cannoli. Does wet wood produce more harmful smoke? So good job, Joe. All right. Good job, guys. And before we give away our final prizes, just a reminder that the campus tour is at 2:05. If anybody wants to do that, it's a great opportunity. Who's coming to the University of Montana next year? All right. So if you want to see the University of Montana, a guided tour, please show up outside in the auditorium there at 2:05. And then Lapway is also doing their own personal tour at 2:05. Just meet out there. Okay? So Earl, Dr. Adams is going to give, he's going to tell us who won the honorable mention for the presentation.
Okay, first for honorable mention, could Daniel Harvala, Ben Ullenbeck, and Tony Meyer from Hellgate High School come down? And second honorable mention from Big Sky High School, Natalie Zimmer, Katie McKay, and Aaron.
finally, from Big Sky High School, Dylan Schweitzer, Andrew
Aaron,
For third place, from Corvallis High School, Chance Stewart and Carly Prentice. Nice job. Second place from Hellgate High School, Tyler Jorgensen, Chris Everett, Kayla Rolick, and Cami Grills. And finally, for the first place from Sentinel High School, Brandon Shannon.
Cassie still here? Cassie Moe? Okay. So Aaron Simmons actually didn't get introduced, and Aaron did a lot of work on the symposium too. So Aaron, thank you. And
Desiree and Carolyn, could you come back too, please? Carolyn Hester.
there you go. So both these two ladies right here just went above and beyond the Call of Duty to put this thing together. So I would like to personally thank Desiree and Carolyn for all the work that they did. And last but not least, so Nancy used to be one of us, and now she's, as you see, sitting with the celebrity judges. So Nancy, we miss you. And maybe next year you can come back to the team or do something. So I love the expression though. So, and with that, thank you. And then we're done.